Hello, my name is Dr. Sage Rainbow, and today is March 31st, 2020, and we're in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. There's a technique called the 10 breaths of life that can actually improve your lung capacity so you'll be in a better position to fight the coronavirus and also to be healthier as well. The coronavirus affects the lungs, and what we're going to do is talk about the alveolar sacs, which are these little tiny balloons in the lungs that expand and contract as you breathe in and out. The surface of these little tiny balloons, which we have about 300 million of them in our lungs, that's the membrane that absorbs oxygen and expels carbon dioxide. When that area of the lung is compromised, you cannot get a proper exchange of oxygen, and this is what kills people. And this is where they need a ventilator, where this surface area gets clogged up with an inflammatory reaction that prevents the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So these little alveolar sacs, if you were to open up them all for the surface, they're the size of a tennis court. That's what's in your lungs right now. You have a tennis court of surface, and this absorbs the oxygen. When that surface gets clogged up, it doesn't absorb it. So if you have a limited breathing capacity, then you can only absorb so much oxygen and you'll have a limited supply. If you get an infection and other problems over that, your supply of oxygen becomes less. So what we're going to do, I'm going to show you this exercise and then I'll explain it more. So basically, your ribs go this way and sideways the other way. So when you breathe in, the ribs open up. And when you breathe out, they close. So we're going to do a breath. One breath of the 10 breaths of life are 3 parts. The first part is the inhalation, and then holding it, and then the exhalation. That's one breath of the 10 breaths of life. Usually we breathe in and out, but we don't have that pause. So what we're going to do, I'm going to breathe in to a certain point where then normally I would breathe out, but I'm not going to breathe out. I'm going to continue breathing in, and it's going to be harder for me to force a little bit more air in. As I bring in that little more air, these alveolar sacs, these alveoli, are going to expand like blowing up a balloon. So the volume of my total lungs with the 300 million alveoli are going to increase. So I'm stretching this balloon and I'm holding that stretch, and then as I breathe out, the balloon's going to contract. So normally when we breathe out, we then breathe in. So in here, instead of just at the end where we would normally stop breathing out and breathe in, I'm going to force myself to breathe out further. So I'm squeezing more air out. These are, I won't say dead spaces, but the air can be more stagnant in these little pockets where we're not getting enough full circulation and ventilation. So let me do it now, and then I'll explain more about this in a moment. So as I count in, the 3 parts of the one breath have to be equal time segments. So let's say we count to 10. Now I can't count to 10 while I'm breathing in, so I'm going to use my fingers instead. And then at the end of 10 or whatever it is, that's my baseline, that's my starting point and your starting point. So whatever that count is, I'm going to hold it for the same count and then I'm going to breathe out. So here's the inhalation. Okay, so when I got to the end of my normal inhalation, taking a deep breath, I'm forcing more air in. I'm increasing my vital lung capacity. And then I'm holding it for the same length of time, and then I'm breathing out the same length of time, and at the end of my normal exhalation, I'm forcing more air out. That squeezes out the dead air spaces. And it also, when you're breathing in, you're also using muscles in your rib cage that you don't use on a normal breath. It's a much shorter cycle. So a lot of the muscles in the rib cage, these intercostal muscles, are lazy or not used too often. So this gets them activated and exercised. Same thing with the exhalation. We very rarely go, even when we're running, we'll do a pant sometimes if we are trying to catch our breath, in and out. But we don't do the full inhalation and then holding it and then breathing out. Normally, we don't hold it in our normal breath. We don't need to. But in this exercise, we're expanding the balloon, stretching it, giving it elasticity, holding it, and then contracting it. This builds up the resiliency in the lungs. This helps us to be our own ventilator, of which there is a scarcity of ventilators. So by increasing your vital air capacity, you will always do better with any lung infection because you already have a greater capacity to absorb oxygen. The smaller your vital air capacity is, the less oxygen you absorb in each breath. Now, how do we know this? So this is called a spirometer. And you can see that it's a very simple gauge. This measures the cubic centimeters of air that you could breathe out. And so we're going to set it at 0. And I'm going to take a breath in. So I didn't want to set a record. So now we have 4,400 and change, 4,300 and change of cubic air that I have breathed out, cubic centimeters of air. So that's my vital lung capacity. So each breath that we breathe out, that's how much air is stored in the lungs that we exchange with the atmosphere. When you breathe out, you cannot breathe out all the air in your lungs. You can never deflate it all. That's called a residual air capacity. That's the amount of air that remains in your lungs. The vital capacity, air capacity, is the one that you exchange back and forth, back and forth. So this other residual air doesn't necessarily get mixed around and circulated as well as those people who exercise continually. They get a faster heart rate, they're breathing in more forcefully, and they're able, with their exercise, to get good circulation. Now, people in nursing homes and people that are elderly or aren't exercising mid-age, any age, they have a bigger problem. So this technique was developed for one of my patients who was a 10-year-old boy. This is in the end of the 60s when I was just starting practice, who had asthma. And I was actually treating their mother for a spinal problem, and she was telling me about her son. So I was able to give certain treatments to her son to open up the rib cage and get rid of a lot of stress, but he would have these terrible asthmatic attacks, and he'd be using an inhaler all the time, but the inhalers no longer were useful at a certain point, and he had to go to the emergency room. So because I knew I could break the attack, and I wanted to get him off the inhalers, because the more he took of inhalers, the less his own body produced their own steroids. When you take it from an outside source, the production in the body lessens. So I was able to break the attack, ease it up so he wouldn't need to go to the emergency room. And I told his mother, well, look, call me anytime it happens, because the more we can reduce the dependency on the outside steroids and have his body build up its own natural amount, he'll need to use the steroids less, and then eventually he won't need to do it as much. So the mother did call me. She called me 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, and 4 o'clock in the morning, and I came to the home and made a house call. I was just starting out in practice. I was thrilled to help, but I realized this couldn't work as an ongoing basis for practical purposes if you had a whole practice of patients like that. I took an x-ray of his chest and of his upper thorax, and I saw that his rib cage and clavicles were all in a straight line. They were all parallel. And he walked like this, very tight, very tense, because he was always fearful of not being able to breathe. When you can't breathe, and people on ventilators know how important your breath is. So he was in this situation, well, what can we do? So I gave him certain stretching exercises, but in addition to that, to loosen up the rib cage, I gave him these very same deep breathing exercises. In fact, one of my patients now, who's recording this in my office, he came in for an unrelated problem to asthma, but mentioned he has it. He had asthma, so I taught him these exercises. He had been taking, how long have you been taking steroids for and inhalers?
Whole life.
Your whole life. How many years would you say? How many decades?
50.
50 years. Okay, and now he barely takes anything because he's done these exercises after 50 years of asthma. And this was a 10-year-old, it works for older patients, and the way I know it works, because after they do these exercises, and I just checked this good man's patient who volunteered to record this, he started out with 2,400 cubic centimeters on October 8th, 1918, and December 2nd, 1918, he had 2,850 cubic centimeters. So he increased his vital air capacity by over 25%, in a very short time. If you could do this now, This is the best thing you could do for the coronavirus. You cannot take medication for it. We don't have any known cure yet. We don't have any vaccine yet. This is a problem with the pulmonary system. So what you can do is increase your vital lung capacity. And by doing that, by increasing your vital air capacity, you will be in better shape, you'll have healthier lungs, and in general, to have a higher intake of oxygen can only benefit you whether you have coronavirus or not. So this is something you're not helpless for. This is something you can do. It's within your realm to do this. So let me review this one more time, and then I'm going to do it sitting down. So for people in nursing homes that can't get up or move around a lot, you can do this sitting down. You can even do it reclining. Whatever you do to increase your vital air capacity only a little bit, you'll be able to stand a better chance of fighting the coronavirus and not being a victim to it. Okay, so let me do it one more time. So again, I'm going to count to, this is for illustration, I'm going to use my fingers to count for an arbitrary number of 10. Now you could look at a clock with a second hand and or just the same rhythmic cadence. So I'll do it. Here we go. So the first part is breathe out. Before you can breathe in, you have to breathe out. So breathe out. Okay, now I call it the 10 breaths of life because the goal is to eventually be able to do 10 breaths from one cycle to the next cycle continuously. When you first do this, you're going to have problems with when you start breathing in and you force the air in and you've expanded it all, and then you go to breathe out, you may find yourself doing this. Holding it, and then so you're letting too much air out at once. This is a normal reaction because you're not used to doing it this way. Don't get worried about it. You have to keep repeating this and timing yourself and pacing yourself so you're controlling your own breath. This is something that belongs to you. This is your body. You have a control factor in it that you can make this choice to increase your capacity. So for people who are in nursing homes, you can do this reclining. People that have trouble standing. Well, let me just show you one thing before. If you do it standing, when I stand with my knees locked and straight, my back goes in a little bit and my upper back goes back a little bit. So when I bend my knees slightly, my hips go back a little and the spine straightens. So the diaphragm attaches to the 12th thoracic vertebra back here, and so there's a little less stress in that area. So that's something to do while you're standing. If you do this sitting, you won't have that problem. So sitting now, I'm going to do it one more time. And there's something else that's important here. So as you breathe in, when I take a deep breath, do you see how my hands go to the side a little when I breathe in. I'm not trying to do that. They do it as my ribs expand. So what I do is, as you bring your arms up, if you take a breath and breathe out, and then if you put your arms out and take a breath and breathe out, you find you have greater capacity to breathe in more air. So for people in bed, rather than raising your arms up and down, you could put your hands on your head like that, and that automatically opens up the bellows. It widens it. You're able to increase your air capacity right away, and you'll be able to breathe in deeper. So I'm going to keep my hands this way, so I'm going to count, and I'll show you. So we do the same cadence. So it's so I can roll right into another breath. And most people, to do this, will probably have to stop after one breath or two breaths, and it's okay. You don't have to do 10 consecutive breaths, as long as you get 10 breaths, a full cycle, inhalation, holding it, and exhalation. That'll still give you the benefit. If you tie them together, it gives you more control, it gives you more sense of self. So this is something that is just fabulous. It's for people that are exposed, not infected, but exposed. This could be of great benefit where there's been dead air in your lungs, or stagnant air spaces, or at least spaces that haven't been circulating as well, and the virus gets in there. And what makes the virus so insidious is that when it gets into these areas in the lungs and the cells of the lungs, the lining, it actually puts the virus's own DNA into the DNA of the cells that are lining the lungs, these little alveoli. And so by having the stretch and forcing air out, you're cleaning up the cobwebs in the corner. It's not a guarantee against any disease, but I can tell you for asthmatics, it has been highly successful. So this is a repurposing of one therapy and using it for another problem. And that's why I'm doing this today, because this is an acute phase that we're going into with our culture, and everything I hear and read about is we don't have enough ventilators, we need ventilators, it's going to be weeks till we get enough ventilators, and the ventilators is a question of life and death. And so become your own better ventilator before you need a ventilator. Okay, and I just want to add on a few things, just some general stretches that are pretty easy to do. The first one, and this is to open up your rib cage more. So again, you want to open up the rib cage as much as you can. So this exercise is, and again, I'm going to bend my knees a little bit. I'm putting my hands behind my back, clasping them. So now some people with shoulder problems, arthritic problems, they won't be able to get their hands all the way back. So most people go like that if they have trouble, or like this. But ideally, you want to clasp your hands. Now, Notice my shoulders. See how they're a little forward? I'm exaggerating it a little. But now when I clasp my hands together and then push your hands down toward the ground, and look at what happens to my shoulders. My shoulders go back. And all of this opens up here. Now I'm going to bring my hands back. Now most people haven't done this in a while. They may only go to here. That's okay. They may not be able to move much at all, but that's your starting point. So for a lot of people, younger people, this will be easier. So you go down straight, and you always keep your eyes looking at the horizon and hard out. Down straight, my chest opens up, and then I go back. I hit a point where, okay, this is maybe as far as I can go without forcing it. I take a breath, and as I breathe out, I relax and go further back, and my chest expansion increases. So however far you can go, you may only be able to do this. Try and go a little bit more when you breathe out on the second breath. You may not be able to keep your hands together, but just go down if you can get them together, and go up a little, take a breath, and go back. That's great to do before these exercises, but it's also a wonderful, simple, quickie thing to do when you're under stress and tension, you're working at a computer, a lot's going on. So you just take a second, and then everything's open again. The other one is very simple, that I call around the world. And this is by rotating your shoulders and arms this way, but you do it together. Because if you do it with just one arm, you'll turn your body and not your shoulders going back together. You want to open this area up as much as possible. So this is like taking off a shirt. So you go across, you always push outward with the hands, you go up. You'll see my rib cage is lifting. I go back a little, down, and around. One more time. Cross over, go back with your elbows and arms as much as you can, straighten the arms, go back and around. We'll do that one more time. There. So that's around the world one way, and then we go around the world the other way. This is like a butterfly stroke. You go down, out, around, and you want to push out this way. And this will stretch the back muscles. Now see, as I'm pushing out here. Okay, so if you do that before the stretching exercises, before the breathing exercises, it'll just give you a little more capacity. Remember, this is not an iron lung breathing for you. This is you increasing your vital air capacity. Now I'd like to show you something real quick. I left my cell phone at home, but if you're using a cell phone or reading or at a computer for a long time, playing video games, whatever you might be doing, where your head is down and usually the shoulders roll forward, and if you're watching this right now, you can just take a second and try this for yourself, okay? Go like this, just like you normally would, and take a deep breath. In fact, I just thought of this, so I'm going to take a deep breath. Before I had over 4,000 cubic centimeters. So now I have about 1,700. That's less, far less than half by many times. So if I'm in this position, just going about my day, a kid playing video games, or you're studying for something on the internet, or texting somebody, and you're in this position for all those hours in a day, what they call screen time, you're reducing your vital air capacity by well over 50% or more. So what do you do though? You need to use your phone, you gotta play that video game, whatever it is. So basically, the best thing is to have a desk and put your elbows on the desk and hold up what you're reading or what you're playing or using your phone this way. That'll give you, that opens things up. So let's see what happens when I'm this way. I'm going to set it to 0. Okay, so there's about 3,000 cubic centimeters. So just changing my posture from this position to that position. And you want to get a support here so you don't have to keep these muscles tight. And just angling it, or even if you're holding the cell phone this way and you just tip it that way, will be helpful. So that's the first time I ever measured this. We're doing this kind of spontaneously, and these are just the hints to keep it going. The spirometer is a clinical, very widely used it was invented over 100 years ago. It just measures the volume of the air that you breathe through, and like a whistle. And it's measurable. It helps in asthma, and I feel these 10 breaths of life. And you should do the 10 breaths, whether it takes you 10 minutes or 20 minutes, just get the 10 breaths in, and do it twice a day at this period in our history where we're going through a terrible pandemic. And I just want to mention briefly, with any infection, it's a question of our body's immune system to fight the infection even before it takes root, which means we can be exposed but not affected. The better our immune system is, the stronger it is, the more we can fight whatever comes our way. Right now, even though we have the COVID virus, the coronavirus, all of us have already been exposed to the flu virus. It's been around for months and months. Everyone doesn't get the flu. Certain susceptible people do, and certain people with compromised immune systems who are more vulnerable may die from it. But we all get exposed to it. Every day we get exposed to almost every kind of bacterium you can think of, and many viruses, but we don't get sick. We don't catch the disease because our immune system identifies it and takes its own, it works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It even started before you were born, when you were in your mother's womb. She was transmitting antibodies to you. So to keep your immune system high, it's good to walk 20 minutes a day. And when you walk, it's important to not walk this way or not walk like that, because again, that compresses the lungs and the rib cage. So very simple. You walk, pretend you have a string right over your heart, and look what happens. If you think of the string pulling, you see my shoulders go back and my head goes up and my rib cage opens up. You don't hold yourself stiff, and when you're walking, let your arms swing, but let them swing freely. They'll naturally swing freely. Don't hold them to your side as you're walking. Don't compress it. Let it flow. Put it out there. And just heart forward. And that's a good thing to do for life, is keep your heart forward all the time. Sleep and rest are very important to keep the immune system healthy. Make sure you get adequate sleep, and then lay down for 20 minutes and just be still. If you nap, nice. If you don't, just be still. For when you rest and sleep, your immune system goes through its repairing jobs. While it's worrying about the stock market and no toilet paper on the shelves, this is stressful. But when so your immune system has all these other conflicting things going on. When you're still and resting, then your immune system can concentrate on its bodily functions and normal processes. This hardly needs to be mentioned, but eat well. Eating well, most people know what that means, but one thing I think is very important is avoid junk food. And I know during this time we all want comfort food, we all want to feel better, but the more food you put in your system that have chemicals that the body isn't used to naturally dealing with, it has to detoxify itself. And when you put in less toxic food, your immune system can concentrate more on doing its job. So that's the important thing of the diet, without going into a whole dietary regime. The other thing is stress. How do you reduce stress? Coincidentally, there's a very simple way, and that's if you just take one regular deep breath, not the whole 3 cycles, that's an exercise. That's the 10 breaths of life exercise. But just take a deep breath and breathe out, and do that 3 times. Now, when you'll see, before you breathe in, when you're stressed, you'll be like this. Shoulders go up, forward, things get constricted, and you're tense. When you take a deep breath, your shoulders automatically go back, your chest expands. They say there's certain stressor elements in the lungs that when they get stretched, it secretes a relaxing hormone in the body. So this is an experiment you can do very simply. 1 deep breath and out, and you'll feel more relaxed. So if you do that throughout the day, that's 3 breaths for life, and then 10 breaths, which is the 3 cycles of 1 breath. That's for the 10 breaths of life. So I hope this all helps you. And one more thing about this moment of a dreadful pandemic. We're going through the pain of our daily living and the quality of life, the threat to life. At this time, it's so important, and I see this happening all over. One of the things that we can do for each other is be kind. Give more kindness to each other and be more caring. Everyone is going through a very difficult time. Through our whole society, and our whole planet is going through a difficult time. And one of the things to do during this difficult times of things where we don't have what we normally have, what we call normality, is give gratitude for what you do have. Because however meager your shelves of toilet paper and food or shelter, or even if you're feeling sick in your health, there's other people that have less food, less shelter, poorer health than you do. So give gratitude that you have for what you do have, whatever it is, however meager it can be, and know that there are so many others have so much less. And we're going to make another segment in a second, which relates to another pandemic we're currently in. So I hope this will help you. I hope to get a Twitter account. I'm going to call it 10 Breaths of Life, and if it's not taken. And so you can put your comments in there of what your experience is with the breathing and what you've learned or what problems you have to share with others. So I thank you so much for your time and patience, and again, please be kinder and caring. This is what our planet is all about and what we need now. There's been too much conflicts, too much polarity, too much toxicity. Our planet needs to detoxify, and we are going through a cleansing process. It's terrible for so many people, but with a spirit of cooperation, working with each other and greater unity, we're going to be better off than we were before with all our conflicts. Thank you, and peace be with you.